Courtney Hyman. Thank you so much for tuning in to Courtney Explains It All. Everybody, thank you for tuning into my vlog today. Today I have Dan Darkow, and we were going to talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act and why that's important. But before we do, Dan, could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I'm really excited about spending our time together. My name is Dan Darkow, and I live here in Butler County in Oxford, Ohio. I currently work at Miami University as the director of the Miller Center for Student Disability Services, and I'm also an adjunct instructor in the Disability Studies program. I have been at Miami on and off since 2015 when I started my journey as a graduate student who graduated from Miami with my master's, and for most of the time I never left. I was there for about 8 years, and then I transitioned to work as the director of disability and testing services at Cleveland State University for a year, and then the director position opened up at Miami, and I couldn't say no. So I moved back to Oxford and have been in that position a little over a year and a half now. So that is a little bit about me. I was born with spinal muscular atrophy, so I have been a full-time wheelchair user since the age of 3. I'm here today partnered with my service dog Kismet. She's my third service dog that I've had from Canine Companions, and when I think about what brings me here today talking with you, it's really the lived experience that I've had as a disabled person, and joining that up with my professional interests and experiences really leads me to build a world where we view disability as an asset-based approach, where we can all bring our unique lens to build a more accessible and inclusive community. So thanks again for having me today.
I'm very excited to talk today, and one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, can you explain to people watching what the ADA is?
Absolutely. When we think about the ADA, it's the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it is our first civil rights law for disabled people. And what that means is it prohibits disability discrimination. When we think about the ADA, we have to look back in history where we want to look more so at what the first U.S. main disability rights law is, and that was the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Section 504. And that was one of the first disability protections related to discrimination, but that only focused on entities that receive federal funding. So disabled people were experiencing access in very segmented ways by only programs and services that receive federal funding. And between 1977, when the regulations were signed of Section 504, and 1990, disabled folks were really wanting, and gnawing for all that access. They were seeing it in certain spaces, but not everywhere. So over that time, it really was an important movement where disabled folks were building coalitions together and advocating for a larger, widespread law, and that's what leads us into the ADA. The ADA covers employment, public services, transportation, public spaces, and various communication. So for me to be able to go to a public bus stop and be able to get on the bus, that's because of the ADA. And what it really did was shifted the focus from fixing people and an individual to removing barriers in our society and creating a more accessible and inclusive society.
Yeah, and I wanted to say, a couple months ago I read Junie Human's memoir, and she was talking about how when she was little, because we didn't have any civil rights law like at ADA or anything, so she couldn't even go to school, and she had to when she got older she had to advocate for herself to be able to be a teacher because at the time the state of New York was saying she couldn't teach because she was a wheelchair user, and I guess they were saying she was a fire hazard because of her wheelchair. So so she had to advocate for herself to be able to teach kids and everything like that.
That's absolutely right. Judy Heumann, what a powerful individual. We all owe her and the entire disability community at the time a debt of gratitude for really pushing civil rights forward for disabled people. Her book, Being Human, is phenomenal. I'm so glad that you had an opportunity to read that. It really shines a bright light in what she was able to accomplish over her lifetime.
And you kind of already touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to ask you why the ADA is important and why should we celebrate its passage?
Yeah, I think the ADA is important because it provides a level playing field for all people with disabilities. Before the ADA, it was legal to deny jobs, services, education, as you just mentioned, to disabled folks. And it really is important that we recognize the hard labor that went into the passing of the ADA and 504 beforehand as well, because that was won through decades of activism, right? We think about the Capitol crawl that took place, the physical chaining of people's bodies and mobility devices to the rotunda, really forcing our legislature to sign these laws and regulations into our law, and that really is something to celebrate, all the work that has been done here. And I think what the celebration does is it honors history, and also at the same time, when we have opportunities to celebrate the ADA and look back at what has been accomplished, it lays a framework that we can recommit to the unfinished work. What is there still that we need to do to ensure a more equitable and accessible world for all people with disabilities?
I like that. So, and you also already kind of touched on this question, but what have you been able to do because of the ADA?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Go to school for one, right? Attend, my undergrad was at Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. That experience to me was made possible because of disability law, right? Being able to have an accessible education, have housing modifications, be provided accommodations, to have an equal opportunity to exceed at an institution of higher education. That's because the ADA exists and the role in providing public accommodations. So that is one of the things that I've been able to do. Certainly live in accessible housing. I've had buildings that are accessible, being able to work in a place that has ADA regulations, that we have elevators and power doors and things along those lines. That is all because of the ADA. And I think about my experiences when I have an opportunity to travel for work across the country and attend and present at various conferences. Being able to go across the country and know there is a floor of what the ADA requires ensures that when I go to another city that I've never been to, there's going to be a minimum amount of accessibility that I can expect. And that is largely because of the ADA. And what that means to me is it's not special treatment, right? It is the equal ability to participate in our society. So that is definitely some of the things that I've been able to do because of the ADA.
Yeah, if anyone has been to our county board office, we have these little bracelets that say, I'm not special, I'm equal.
I love that. Absolutely. That's fantastic.
And I feel like that goes to your point, because we're not asking for special treatment, we're just asking for the same treatment as everybody else.
Absolutely. And sometimes to accomplish that, we may need some additional accommodations or services.
So next question I wanted to ask you was, what changes have you seen institutions like in schools or workplaces to accommodate people with disabilities?
Yeah, I think some of the changes that we've seen as of late is an exciting change, and one that we need to continue to propel is this idea that we don't have to always work from a compliance-based approach, but we can move toward proactive, accessible design. If we embed accessibility into our policies and our practices and our mindset, we can really open up doors to a wide range of people with disabilities. And that's something that I've seen really catch on as of late, where we think about, for example, this vlog likely is going to have captions. 5, 10 years ago, not all videos had captions. We have AI coming into the space. We have more folks being mindful of correcting automatic captions to be human generated. These are all things that move access from someone needing to ask for it, for an individualized accommodation, to it being done proactively to ensure that all folks can have access from the beginning. So that to me is something that I've seen really help overall, is this idea of moving from a reactive approach to a proactive approach, where we can move us forward in ensuring that we're doing this proactive approach more consistently, and not only in pockets across our world.
Yeah, and something for our viewers to know is that the Butler County Board, we were able to partner with some local places to get adult changing tables. So now we have some adult changing tables in different places, which will help Butler County be more accessible.
That's fantastic. I love to hear that.
So Miami had a summer program that I got to do where people with and without disabilities got to go to Miami for a week and participate in a college program. And one of the things we learned about was disability studies. We talked about the medical model and the social model, and I feel like when I was younger, even though I didn't have those words, I feel like my view of my disability was very like medical model. Like I feel like I kind of viewed it more as like something I needed to overcome rather than like how can we change society. So I guess like that's my question, is how can we help others see that like disability isn't necessarily like the problem.
Absolutely. I mean, you said that so eloquently, and I think similarly that until I was explicitly exposed to this idea of the medical and social model, we're inherently told from a very young age that disability is a problem that needs to be fixed, and something that there is prejudice and stigma and all these things that surround it. And I think it's so important that we elevate representation of disabled folks in our world that can speak positively about their experiences with disability. I think role models really do matter, and the more that we can put out role models that experience disability in all aspects of the disability spectrum, from readily apparent disabilities to non-readily apparent disabilities, and everywhere in between, that is so important in how we can really begin to shift the narrative around disability. I think about different organizations that have mentoring or leadership opportunities available. I think that's how we can create more of a pipeline for disabled folks to engage with mentors that may have more developed understanding of disability, because when you understand the power behind the disability community, and one that is not generally known until later on in life, I think that is when full realization that you have a whole community behind you that can support you, provide you knowledge, and help you along the way. That's what's incredibly important, and really that is where we move from shame and stigma to really celebrating disability.
The next question I wanted to ask you was, what are some things that you think the disability community needs to advocate for? I know there's a lot, but
there certainly is a lot to advocate for. I think the first thing I'll say is that we need to advocate for better attitudes around disability. I know that seems so simple and isn't necessarily as concrete as a policy, but I think we need to advocate for people to really analyze themselves and their preconceived notions around disability. That would change so many conversations right from the beginning. When I think about some other things that we need to advocate around, my background is actually I went to Wright State for Management Information Systems and Computer Science. So I have a passion related to digital accessibility, and that's something that we need to continue to advocate to ensure in our digital world that we're not leaving folks with disabilities behind because they can't access online or digital content. So we need to make sure that we're continuing to advocate for accessible digital media and digital access in all of the technologies that are currently being built. And of course, as someone that relies on personal care assistance and caregiving to live independently in the community, we need to continue to advocate for funding structures that support long-term care and living in the community. Those are a few things that I think about when we are thinking about what we want to advocate for and raising. The last thing I say is just raising up disabled people that maybe have multiple marginalized identities, that may not have a voice, that we want to make sure their needs are being raised alongside everyone else's.
I like that. And I wanted to also ask you, how has your personal journey shaped the way you advocate for disability rights?
Yeah, my personal journey, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, on the west side. I am a middle child, and as a middle child, I have an older sister and a younger brother, and it was really important for my parents to include me in all aspects of our family life and what their activities were. So from that aspect, I really wasn't treated any differently in what my young years were in growing up, and that transcended and also into my educational experience. I think about a lot when I was a wheelchair user in K through 4 and experiencing that with my peers. When people don't know any differently, they don't treat you any differently, right? And as a result of experiencing those formidable years with my peers and being disabled, it always felt like that was the norm for us. And it really wasn't until I would be out in the community that I would feel more where people were thinking differently and having those attitudinal barriers. And those can sometimes be as harmful as physical barriers, right? The comments that people are making or the intrusive questions, things like that. And those are some of the things that I really think shaped my view. And certainly, as I mentioned before, going to Wright State University that has underground tunnels and attracts a lot of disabled folks to their university because of its physical access. That was the first time that I really experienced multiple disabled people being together in one room. I appreciated that community that it was building, and really set me on the trajectory for where I am today, that really views accessibility as a foundation of how we can bring people together.
And how can allies best support accessibility efforts?
That's a great question. I think a lot about listening, and it's so incredibly important to listen to the real life experiences of people with disabilities. That is the foundation of how we create systemic change. When you listen to a person who experiences disability and they tell you how they experienced the barrier or what their experience was when they interacted with someone, and how it was negative and what could be done differently. That is something that I want folks to take with them, and I want them to, when you know better, do better, right? And that really is important to then improve spaces that you influence. So if you hear me explain something that was inaccessible, and the next time I come, you've listened to me and you've made sure that event or experience is more accessible and understands my own access needs, that's how I think allies can really help, is listening, taking that and providing action moving forward. And then when I'm not there in the room, speaking up for people with disabilities when we aren't present. I think that also is important to ensure accessibility when you know disability is going to be there, but also when it might not, and you're anticipating in case someone experiences disability that hasn't disclosed. That creates more an accessible environment for everyone.
And I was going to say, so behind us is our Butler County mission statement, and our self-advocacy group Speak Up. We got to say like what we wanted in the mission statement and say like, you know, the words that we wanted to be in there. So that was really neat to be a part of that.
I think that's fantastic. I'm so happy to hear that.
And I wanted to ask you, what does true inclusion look like to you?
Wow, that's a hard question. But I think about true inclusion, that there's no need to ask for an individualized accommodation, that our access needs are welcomed and they are valued, supported, and anticipated. That we move in a society that understands disability is here. There is nothing wrong with disability, and it is an aspect that adds creativity to our lived experience. Disabled people are some of the most creative people that you've ever met because we live in a world that was not built for us. And that's so important that true inclusion would allow for built-in accessibility, with disabled people designing and leading our program services within our society in a true sense of belonging, not just existence.
I like that. And honestly, I feel like something that really helped me that I wish that we could have learned about like when I was younger, like when I was in school, was what I mentioned earlier, like learning about the disability rights movement and like the work that disabled people do, because I feel like that was what inspired me to like get into advocacy and be like, okay, I can use like my own personal experience to help other people that are like me and have disabilities and help other people learn how to advocate for themselves.
Absolutely. Disability education earlier in our curriculum is so incredibly important. The fact that I didn't learn much about disability rights until my graduate program, and something that many disabled folks don't experience, is absolutely something that we need to spend more time on advocating for to ensure that disabled folks don't take for granted that we live in a world that's inherently accessible based on the ADA, but there was a lot of fight that went in to get to where we are today to continue that fight into the future.
Mm-hmm. And that actually leads me into my last question I had for you, which was, what are your hopes for the next generation of disability advocates?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think about how much time we spend on some of the basics. We spend so much time on talking about language preferences, person first, identity first language, how to etiquette, some of these things that are so incredibly important, but also take a lot of advocacy time. And what I would rather think about is more on innovation related to accessibility. What are ways that we can totally change systems that have been broken for years and innovate them and redesign them in a way that considers the disability experience from the ground up, where accessibility is embedded and assumed, not negotiated at every turn along the way. Those are some of the things that I think about for our next generation, but I also think about where we've come, recognizing that 504 and ADA, those were all implemented because of strong coalitions, that included people with disabilities alongside other marginalized groups, right? So I think about, in the next generation, making sure that we continue to build strong coalitions across social justice movements because we are stronger together.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming and talking to me about this. I feel like we have a really important conversation, and I'm glad we got to talk together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for the invitation. It was a pleasure to be here, and I really enjoyed your perspective, and talking about this stuff really excites me. So thanks again for bringing me on today.
Yeah, it excites me too. So I'm very excited for everybody else to be able to see this and listen to our conversation, and hopefully, start thinking about how they could help support the disability community if they're not already doing so.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Thanks for watching Courtney Explains It All. And remember, nothing about us without us.